Alina lived a life painted in shades of beige. It was not a bad life. It was, by all accounts, a sensible one. She had a job that paid her just enough, an apartment that was just big enough, and routines that were comfortable and crushingly predictable. Her life was a long, straight, neatly paved sidewalk. But in the quiet moments, in the pause between the coffee machine's brew and the 8 a.m. news, a hollow ache would bloom in her chest. It was the ache of someday. Someday, she would whisper to herself, I'll learn to paint. Someday, she'd think, I'll travel. Her shelves were filled with someday books, guides to Italy, manuals on watercolor, journals that were pristine and empty. She was a person waiting for her own life to begin. One rainy Tuesday, her routine was broken. The bus she always took was diverted by construction, letting her off in a part of the city she had never seen. It was a tangle of old cobblestone alleys, smelling of wet stone and forgotten time.
I've been expecting
Lost and a little annoyed, she turned a sharp corner, looking for a landmark, and she saw it. It shouldn't have been there. Tucked between a modern glass office and a brick laundromat was a building that seemed to have been plucked from another century. It was made of dark, ancient marble with no windows, only a pair of towering bronze doors. A single carved plaque above them read in elegant, worn letters, "The Library of All Stories." It was not a public library. There was no sign for hours, no cheerful posters. It was just there. A deep, humming silence seemed to come from it. A silence that, for the first time, felt louder than the city traffic. Alina, driven by a curiosity she hadn't felt in years, pushed one of the heavy bronze doors. It swung open without a sound. She stepped inside. The city noise vanished. She was in a vast circular foyer, lit by a warm, unseen light. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and a faint, unidentifiable scent like dust and ozone. In the center of the room sat a man at a massive circular desk. He was impossibly old, his face a map of gentle wrinkles, his eyes the color of faded ink. He did not look up, but he spoke, his voice like the rustle of turning pages. "You are not lost, Alina. You are simply early." Alina froze. "How did you know my name?" "The library knows every name," the librarian said, finally looking up. His gaze was kind. "We have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me? I don't understand. What is this place?" "It is exactly what it says," the librarian said, gesturing. "It is the library of all stories. Every life that ever was, is, or could be, is recorded here." He pointed to a grand archway on his right, marked with a rising sun. "That is the East Wing, the Hall of Records. It holds the finished, bound, and completed life stories of every soul who lived." Then he pointed to an identical archway on his left, marked with a setting moon. The air from it felt cool, dusty, and still. "And that is the West Wing, the scriptorium, the Hall of Waiting." "Waiting for what?" Alina asked. The librarian's smile was sad. "We have unwritten books." "You have unwritten books?" "Oh, yes. We have more of those than anything else. They are the most tragic part of the collection." Alina, drawn by a mixture of awe and a strange, cold dread, walked toward the East Wing. "May I?" "It is why you are here," the librarian said. She stepped through the archway and gasped. The hall was breathtaking. It soared upwards into a dome of glowing light. Every wall, from floor to ceiling, was packed with millions of books. But these were not normal books. Each one was unique. Some were huge, leather-bound tomes, thrumming with energy. Others were small, simple, cloth-bound volumes. Some glowed. Some seemed to whisper as she passed. She walked the aisles, her fingers brushing the spines. She saw names she recognized from history books. She pulled one out, The Life of a Legendary Female Explorer. The book was thick, its pages filled with dramatic, swirling script, illustrated with maps of unknown lands and sketches of impossible creatures. It felt warm to the touch. She was afraid. She was terrified every single day, but she wrote. Alina nodded, closing the book reverently. It's a masterpiece. It is complete, the librarian corrected gently. That is the only requirement here. So, only the great ones get in? Alina asked, feeling that familiar hollowness return. The explorers, the kings, the artists? You are confusing greatness with completeness, the librarian said. He led her down a smaller, quieter aisle. He pointed to a book on a low shelf. It was small, bound in simple, warm brown cloth. It looked ordinary. The title simply read, Matteo, the Baker. Alina knew that name. It was old Matteo, who had run the small bakery on her street corner, who had passed away last year. She had always thought he lived such a small life. Curious, she opened it. She expected a thin, simple story, but the book was full. It was packed from cover to cover with writing, not of grand adventures, but of moments. The texture of flour at 4 a.m., the joy of a perfectly formed loaf, the secret ingredient in his wife's favorite bread, the tiny, satisfied smile of a customer. The book was a dense, rich tapestry of small, lived, meaningful moments. It was just as thick in its own way as the explorers. It is not the size of the story, Alina, the librarian whispered. It is the living of it. It is the act of writing. Matteo's book is here because he lived his purpose. He loved his work. He finished his tale. His book is done. Alina closed Matteo's book, her hands trembling. A new, desperate hope filled her. My book, she said, her voice barely audible. Is it here, in this wing? The librarian's kind eyes filled with a profound sorrow. He did not speak. He simply turned and began to walk toward the dark, silent archway of the West Wing. The West Wing was the opposite of the East Wing. It was cold. The light was gray and dim. The shelves stretched up into an oppressive, dusty darkness, far higher and vaster than the East Wing. And the silence. It was not a peaceful silence. It was a dead one. A silence of waiting. The shelves were full, packed with billions upon billions of books. But as Alina got closer, a cold horror washed over her. They were all blank. They were beautiful. Some were bound in royal purple velvet, others in rugged traveler's leather, others in soft, artistic suede. Each one was a masterpiece of potential, and every single one was empty. These are, Alina whispered, horrified. The Unwrittens, the librarian said, his voice heavy. The some days, the what ifs, the I'm too afraid. The I'll start tomorrow's. Alina walked dazed through the endless aisles of failed potential. She saw books with grand titles embossed in gold: The Cure for Cancer, The Great Peacemaker, all utterly, painfully empty. I don't understand. Are these people dead? Some are. Many are not. They are simply not writing. They are existing. They are waiting. They are planning. But they are not living. They are not committing. And so their books wait here in the dust. Alina's heart was pounding. She was almost too afraid to ask. My book? The one you said you were waiting for? Where is it? The librarian did not lead her far. On a low, accessible shelf in a section marked A sat a book that made her gasp. It was the most beautiful binding she had ever seen. It was a soft, deep blue, the exact color of the twilight sky she loved. The leather was supple, and embossed on the cover in elegant silver script was her name, Alina. It's beautiful, she breathed, reaching out a trembling hand. It was the book of her dreams. It was the potential she always knew she had. Of course, every soul is given a magnificent vessel. The potential is always grand. With a feeling of sacred dread, Alina opened her book. It was empty. Page after page after page of pristine, perfect, high-quality parchment. Not a mark, not a word, not a smudge. Nothing. Her life, her potential, her entire being was a blank, unwritten book in the dustiest, saddest room in existence. She sank to the floor, the book in her lap, and a single hot tear fell and stained the first page. It was the first mark ever made inside it. But I'm still alive. I still have time. Yes, the librarian said, his voice softer than ever. You are alive. That is why you are early. You are not here as a reader, Alina. You are here as an author. But you have been standing in front of your book for 35 years, admiring the cover, afraid to make a mark, afraid to begin.
A new terror seized Alina, a terror she knew well. But how? She cried, clutching the book.
How do I even
start? What if I write the wrong thing? What if I choose the wrong story? What if I make a mistake and ruin it? The librarian looked at her, and for a moment, his ancient eyes seemed to see every someday she had ever uttered. You are afraid of committing, he stated. You are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of permanence. Come. He led her from the great hall of blank books into a smaller, even dustier, more chaotic side room. This room was also filled with books, but these were different. They were scattered, piled on the floor, overflowing from shelves. And as Alina looked closer, she saw they all had her name on them. Alina, Alina, Alina. What are these? These, the librarian said, are your drafts. He picked one up. It was bound in beautiful painted canvas. The title read, Alina, the Artist. Alina's heart ached. This was her deepest someday. She opened it, The first page had a single hesitant charcoal sketch of a flower. The rest of the book, blank. She dropped it and picked up another, this one bound in rugged leather. Alina, the Traveler. She opened it. The first chapter was titled Chapter 1, Buying the Ticket to Italy. The chapter was empty. The rest of the book was empty. Another, Alina, the Kind Mother. Another, Alina, the Musician. Another, Alina, the Business Owner. Page after page, book after book, all with a single, hopeful first step, and then nothing. An entire library of her own abandoned dreams. I don't understand, she wept. I thought about all these. I wanted them. Aren't they part of my story? Thinking about being a painter is not being a painter, the librarian said, his voice firm but not unkind. Buying a book on Italy is not going to Italy. These are not stories. They are fantasies. They are lives you held at arm's length, lives you were afraid to commit to, in case you failed, or in case you succeeded and then were trapped by that success. The library, Alina, does not accept drafts. It does not accept what-ifs. It only accepts a single, committed, lived-in story. You cannot be both the artist and the traveler and the musician. Not all at once, and certainly not by doing nothing. You must choose. You must pick one book, your true book, and you must begin. You must be brave enough to make a mark that cannot be erased.
Alina stood in the chaos of her own potential, her own indecision. The sight of all her abandoned drafts, all her wasted some days, was more painful than the single blank book. She looked at the librarian, her eyes filled with the final greatest fear. But what if I choose and I make a mess of it? What if my story is full of mistakes? What if it's not a good story? I saw the Explorer's book. I saw Matteo's book. They were so perfect, so complete. I don't want to hand in a book that's full of failure. The librarian's ancient face broke into a warm, gentle smile. "Oh, my dear child," he said. He walked back to the east wing, took the grand, thrumming book of the legendary explorer and brought it to her. "You call this book perfect?" he said. He opened it, not to the grand maps, but to a chapter in the middle. Alina looked. The entire page was a mess. It was covered in angry, black, crossed-out lines. The words underneath spoke of being lost in a jungle, of betraying a friend, of giving up.
No one ever does.
The page next to it was stained, the ink blurred, as if someone had wept onto it for hours. I didn't see this," Alina whispered. "No one ever does," the librarian said. "They only see the grand cover. But this is the story. This is the plot. Do you think a story is just a string of successes? A story is conflict. A story is failure. A story is getting lost and finding your way back. A story is about making a mess and then trying to clean it up. These stains, these crossed-out lines, this is what makes the story real." Matteo's book was the same. It held the grief of his burnt bread, the failure of his first shop, the arguments with his wife. He did not write a perfect life, Alina. He wrote an honest one. He closed the explorer's book and placed it back. He then looked at her, his inky eyes holding hers. A blank book is a tragedy. A book full of mistakes, tear stains and failures, that is a masterpiece. That is a life lived.
Alina looked down at the beautiful blank blue book in her hands. Her book. Alina. It was no longer a symbol of her failure. It was an invitation. She walked back to the central desk. The librarian watched her. A small, ornate quill pen and a pot of black ink had appeared on the desk. They seemed to hum with the same light as the library. Her hands were shaking. She was terrified. She would fail. She would make a mess. She would choose the wrong path. It would be imperfect. Good, she whispered to herself, a new strange word on her tongue. She sat down. She opened her book to the first pristine white page, stained only by that single tear. She picked up the heavy quill. She dipped it in the ink. She hovered over the page, her heart pounding. She did not write a title. She did not write an introduction. She did not plan the ending. She simply moved her hand to the top of the page, and in a wobbly, imperfect but permanent script, she wrote two simple, terrifying, and wonderful words. She stopped. She looked at the words. The ink was so dark, so real. A slow, steady smile, a real smile, spread across her face. She looked up at the librarian. He was beaming, his entire face a network of joyful wrinkles. He nodded once. Alina closed her book, the first two words of her new life safely inside. She tucked it under her arm. She walked to the great bronze doors, and without looking back, she pushed them open and stepped out into the rain and into the rest of her story. She was no longer a reader. She was at last the author. We are all Alina. We all stand in the scriptorium of our own lives holding a beautiful blank book called Our Potential. We are terrified of making a mark, terrified of choosing the wrong story, of making a mess, of creating a mess. So, we wait, we plan, we dream, and our books gather dust. But the library is not waiting for a perfect story. It is waiting for an honest one. It is waiting for your one. Your failures are your plot. Your scars are your illustrations. Your joy is your theme. You are not meant to admire the cover. You are meant to fill the pages. What someday dream have you left as a blank draft? What is the first small, imperfect sentence you can write today to finally begin chapter 1? If this story helped you find your pen, help our community grow. Subscribe to Mindbloom Animation for more stories that inspire us all to be the author.